Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Outside the Rally. I'm your host, Dean Baer. Before we get started tonight, I want to recognize the loss of Hall of Famer Greg Peck. I had the opportunity since the U.S. Open to speak with him quite often, actually. His racquetball knowledge, his stories, they will be missed greatly. Tonight's episode is dedicated to you, Greg. Please, the entire racquetball community, let's observe a small moment of silence in his honor. Thank you, everyone. So tonight, I will be joined by two pioneers in racquetball. First up will be Rafael Filippini, the CEO and founder of Gearbox Sports. We'll discuss his transition from player to founder of Gearbox, one of the main brands in racquetball today. After that, Pablo Fajre is up. He's the director of streaming for the IRT, and we're going to find out how he started streaming in racquetball and how the WRT was born. Let's take a short break, and we'll be back with our first guest, Rafael Filippini from Gearbox Sports, right here on Outside the Rally.
Hey, Coach Fran Davis here. Check out my racquetball tips on the IRT website, or check out my YouTube channel, Fran Davis Racquetball. Now let's get back to the show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome Rafael Filippini to the show. Rafa, welcome to Outside the Rally. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dean. Thanks for the invite. Glad to be here. Very sad by the news. I just learned about it here at the beginning of the show. So, my condolences to the family. Both brothers are awesome and, greatly missed.
Yeah. His knowledge of the game and his stories actually will be extremely missed. So thank you for that. So, Rafa, let me take you back to the early days. How did you personally get involved in racquetball in general?
All right. In general, well, I first joined the military when I was 17. I was shipped off to Memphis, Tennessee for A school. It was an aviation school in Millington, Tennessee, which is right outside of Memphis. And, when you're kind of young, I think I was 18 by the time I got to A school after boot camp and all that. I wasn't sure which direction my life was going to go at that time. And so anyway, when you're in the military and you're underage, 21, you can go to the E-clubs and drink all you want. Back then it was, I'm talking about 1987-ish. Or you kind of dedicate yourself a little bit more. And so I kind of went in the aviation route with the Marines, so that's kind of not a normal route, I would guess. People talk about Marines and you think grunts and, rifles and shooting and doing all this stuff, but not necessarily aviation. So I had a unique opportunity there, and I thought, hey, this is really cool. I always enjoyed aviation. So anyway, the choice was, do you go to school all day, and then what do you do with your time in the evening? So I just happened to walk past some racquetball courts, and there was a gentleman there playing, and I asked him to play, and he says, have you ever played before? I said, not really. And he told me no. So I was like, oh boy. I was like, okay, so it was just one of those, not until I want to play with somebody that's better. So that sort of, being competitive and growing up playing sports a lot, most of my life, I said, well, I'm going to show that guy, I'm going to go and practice every day. So I would get on the court and just drill and practice. I didn't even know what I was practicing. I would just go in and hit a ball, right? And
you called it drilling.
Yeah, I called it drilling, whatever. I just went in, hit balls. And I remember that one distinct time when I hit the ball, and it makes that really strange sound when you hit the ball hard, and it just does this whop sort of. I was like, whoa, what was that? And I wanted to repeat it, after time, and I just wanted to hit it harder, because that noise just sort of drove me. So then after a couple of months of just doing that, I thought, I'm going to go find this guy and play him, right? I thought I was ready. And never found the guy. I mean, it's just playing that never found him. But thanks to whoever that was, he drove me to, to just get in the racquetball court and just drill. And I actually immediately just kind of fell in love with it. I knew about it because obviously in the 80s here in California, and I'd seen it, but I never really played. And not up until that point, I began to dedicate more and more time to play.
It's funny because just going off what you just said there, it's like someone introduces you to racquetball. They're not even there to share the joy of it, but that's what we have to do as racquetball players. We got to introduce people to racquetball. It's an excellent story. So I went through ProRacquetballStats.com, my buddy Todd Boss. I went through your pro events. You played pro events from 1996 all the way up to 2013. So I looked over your history, and you beat some pretty good players. I think back then they weren't that good, but they're pretty good now. You took care of a Sebastian Franco and a Carlos Keller. So were you playing full-time on the tour?
No, when I played them, no. I did play more full-time about 98. And, I did have some good victories. And back then, the players that the ones you remember, I recall a match against Drew Kostick that was, I think he was 1 or 2 at the time. And, I went tiebreaker was like 12-10 in the 5th game. And, so just kinds of moments. I was never, I think my highest ranking was in the 12 to 14, so I was just one of those. So I would solid, but not a great player. He gave some great matches against some players, some not so great. I remember one against Cliff that was, I trained, I was ready, and we had the group we were training with, and I went in and played Cliff in Boston, and they, as I was warming up, they rolled up this whole TV crew right behind me, and I kind of looked back and was like, "What is it?" And it was like, 5 News or whatever it was, and I thought I was playing great. I went in and played, and it was 1-1-1 at the end. I was like, "Whoa, what happened there?" But in my mind, I was actually playing pretty darn good. But it was Cliff at his best moments, and what do? I got a few side outs, but you never just score, and you just don't realize that until you're given the handshake. Thanks for participating.
Good players are like that. They'll have many side outs. They take all those chances when they're on offense, but when they're on defense, they don't let you score. Good players.
Right.
They don't. They keep that number extremely low. So you've been involved in our sport for quite some time. What do you see different in today's game opposed to back in the 90s when you saw the Cliffs and you started yourself?
Yeah, I kind of lived through that transition. You mentioned Sebastian Franco, and those were some of the later matches that I played. And I actually believe, initially back in the mid 90s, it was this just serve and put the ball away, right? So everything was. They even had the one serve rule, and you made sure that you got the first serve in every time. So there's no question about it. It was just driving the ball, and if you get a setup, you're putting it away. Sudsy was probably the best at it, most aggressive player. Balls from above his head, like just trying to flat roll them, and it didn't seem like high percentage racquetball, but it was actually good percentage racquetball. It was fairly high because it was sort of the norm. But what happened, I think, later, you had the Alvaros that came in. You have more technical players that, sort of move the ball. Right? Don't get me wrong. I think Sudsy was very technical in all this, but they just changed the strategy a little bit more. And so some of the aggressiveness went away, but more of the planning and strategic part of the game, I think, was played slightly different. So a little bit, I think, that's missing maybe today, a little bit of that killer instinct. We used to get a lot of elbows and knees and, a lot of close play.
There's a lot of trash talking back then. And you don't see that now.
There were some really bad things. Like you go in and, you're smiling, but people outside the court really didn't have a clue what was going on inside. You're like ready to just rip somebody, like just grab them by the throat. And but you have to contain all of those things. I would imagine it still happens today, but it just seems so much different, in terms of that aggression, I guess, in the court. But no, I mean, it's just the styles are different. But I enjoy the game today too, quite a bit.
There's a couple of rivalries, not too many.
Yeah.
I don't want to give them away just yet. So let's jump right into Gearbox Sports. How did you start that company? And I'm sure it's not a one-man show. It's not just you out there. So tell me about the team behind the brand.
Well, actually, the way it began, a lot of people know I used to work with another company. I was the way, we mentioned the military, playing racquetball initially. In the Marines, I began, and then fortunately I got better, good enough to make it to the Marine Corps racquetball team. So back then the branches had the Army, the Navy, Air Force, and the Marines. We each had a competitive team. So then you would go out and compete against the different branches, and so that sort of guided me both in some of the things that I was doing with school while I was on the Marines. And then it began sort of guiding more the direction. Like, hey, I like the sports. I like, in the aviation side, I first was introduced to some composite training there. So meaning carbon fiber and molding processes and things. So a lot of what I did was very specific with carbon fiber, with some of the aircraft that I was involved with. And so that sort of gave me the direction. And I came back to San Diego, and the company that I work with, I began to do some R&D things with them, and working and developing products, and worked with that company for about 13 years. It was eForce, and I was very happy. But it's just, as you kind of grow, and I was seeing the direction of where they were going and what I wanted to do, and it didn't just blend quite right at the end. And yeah, one day I just, I decided, I was like, hey, I'm developing a lot of products, a lot of things, and I want to be able to do it. I mean, that's what the American dream is about, right? If you can make it better.
100%.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, hey, let's go for it. And I did speak, with Ron. I was like, hey, I'm going to leave, and this is what I want to do. There was never, any animosity. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't happy, but it's just that was the direction that it took. And because I felt that I wanted to do more, I think it wasn't just the business side for me. It was from the player side that I was seeing things. I was like, boy, there's a lot more that we can do for the sport, particularly around that time. That was around 2007. It was like, there's a lot we can do to change and promote the sport. And maybe, I felt that they weren't, there was a lot of things were happening in the sport where promotion wasn't really happening. So I felt like, no, I really felt this drive. I just got to go, and then not only try and develop a brand, but also promote the sport in a bigger way.
So you started as a one-man show?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And today it's not a one-man show, correct?
No, it's not. No, we've had, we've grown, but it wasn't a one-man show. I mean, we started, I did have an investor initially, a cousin of mine, but he was more of a silent person. But
those are the best.
Yeah, but not anymore. And so then we branched off, and my background is composites and structures and all this. So racquetball was our foundation, and I get the thrill. I consider myself an inventor, but also trained in engineering. So it kind of drives a lot of my passions. One, the playing, developing products. You have an idea in your head from the inventor side, and then when you actually produce it and you see somebody using it, or they tell you, hey man, I really enjoy this product, that's a really good feeling. There's satisfaction to that. And then now we're, when you're in a position that you say, okay, well, what else can we do to help improve the sport, or what can we do for the sport? Because, as we got out there, one, you're looking to how to develop your brand and and grow. But then you also do see the opportunities that are out there, or maybe the challenges some people are having, and you say, well, how can we step in or work together and solve some of these issues, or improve the situation? So that's the other side.
So you mentioned the engineering part. Are you responsible for the making or the engineering section of making the products now, or is that something?
No, that's me. Yeah. That's really, and that's what Gearbox is really founded on. And even with the prior company with E4, I mean, that was I've developed, I think, over 18 different patents and technologies and products, not only racquetball, but other products as well involved with composites. So that is really me behind, that's what drives me. That's the basis of our brand is. So it's not just, I'm going to, let's see what kind of product I can pick up off the shelf and sell it. No, that's, we actually sit down and, what can I, as a player, is like, I remember that Cliff match, obviously very, very. So
and if I had a magic wand,
if I had something better, I want to get more points off of him, so it's like I was always trying to work, hit it harder or more control or this, and you're trying to improve things. And then later on, at first, you're like, well, I need better tools so I can play better. But then later you begin to see the value from a customer standpoint. Okay, well, if I'm spending $230 for a racket, I want it to be more powerful or more control, but also more durable. You want it to last. It's an investment. And so you begin to learn all these other aspects of it and what really drives a good quality brand. So even having people being able to answer the phone when you call the company and having a live person answer your questions. So all of those things become important. And I think for the industry, one of the things, and maybe Pablo could attest to it, is I always said is like, if people want to take us serious as an industry in racquetball, because we always say it's the greatest sport, right, on the planet, let's act like it, or let's really do things like it is the greatest sport. But a lot of times I just felt we fell short a lot of the things of our actions weren't really I guess reflecting what the words that we were saying. So I wanted to change that, and I wanted more of my actions to speak, or the actions of our brand to speak, and then make true change. So that's kind of the what has driven me for, oh boy, now 14 years and even prior. Yeah.
Oh, you have a lot of success at it. It's evident that you're still obviously one of the major players in our sport. So speaking of players, it seems that Alvaro Beltran is the face of Gearbox. The best. He's the longest playing Mexican player on tour. And you have a personal relationship with him. He was the first player signed by Gearbox.
Yes.
For a while. I have to ask you, if he wasn't a friend, would you still have signed him?
That's a good question.
Are you going to plead the fifth?
No, absolutely. Alvaro is, I'm going to tell you a story, and you're going to really understand the loyalty of how, and just sort of, the relationship that we have. So I had left, E-Force, and that was December. The company was not going to be open. I mean, we incorporated in January, and then our first product wasn't going to be delivered until like July. So 6-7 months down the road, right? So he was just also coming off a contract, and he said, Rafael, what should I do? I mean, I don't have a contract. I know you're leaving. I've got a couple offers out there. What should I do? And I said, look, I want to tell you that I'm going to, things are going to be great and all this. But to be honest, I said, I would go and take the money. The money sitting on the table, do a 1-year thing. Let's see where we're at. If we're around after that first year, come back and let's check it out. So he agreed. He says, okay, I'm going to go. And he went and he drove up, or, went to go take care of his contract and sign this deal. And he actually called me on the phone. He says, Rafael, I said, hey, what's going on? I said, did you get it done? He says, no, I'm actually driving up. And I pulled over on the side of the road. I don't want to do it. I said, but that's like a sure thing. And he says, yeah, I get that. But you know what? We've been friends for a long time. He says, whatever, man. I'm going to go with you. If we succeed together. If we fail, we'll both crash. So I'm like, I'm like, all right. I mean, it's really, I'm telling you, like, go, right? It's like, that's a sure thing. And he says,
well, no. Rafa, hold that thought for a second, because speaking of Alvaro, I want to bring him on right now.
Whoa.
Alvi. So obviously, Rafa, you didn't know he was coming on.
No,
I heard this. I heard portion of this story. So, Alvaro, you want to chime in? How true is that?
It's almost like Rafa said. What's up, Rafa? But I was drunk actually that moment when I decided.
That I didn't know.
It's the best decision I ever made, man. We had so much fun throughout these years, and just promoting the brand, the sport, and Gearbox. It's a family for us, so it's been awesome. The best decision ever I made in racquetball.
Thanks.
And Rafa, he made a lot of decisions. I don't know if you've watched Alvaro's career. Sometimes he's making decisions left and right on the court.
He's been a coach too. Now my boss, and he's been my coach. I mean, I remember he told me the first two things he told me, the advices to play the tour before I started playing the tour. He said two things. If you want to play the tour, you gotta have at least 2 or 3 weapons. If you don't have none, don't bother. I thought beating the guys at the club and local players, that made me I was gonna be do good. So he said that, and I started working on my splat shot and other things in those days. And the other thing is, like, stop hitting it like a girl. He told me, get strong and hit it like a man.
Girl, I said, you got to hit like a man.
Me such a hard time, man. He gave me because I couldn't hit it hard.
So good decision looking back now, Alvaro. I want you to tell the fans and the viewers something about that they don't know about Gearbox or Rafael, either one. Kind of pick one that nobody knows. So you don't have to spill the tea, just a little bit.
They know almost everything, but
well, you got to know something about Rafa.
What can he say? He doesn't drink, but when he drinks, he's pretty fun. That's all I can say.
Well, we're gonna have to have a drink at some point, Rafa. So, all right. This question's for both of you. What was it like in the beginning? So you told that story about, Alvaro kind of coming back into the fold. So what was it like, and either one of you can answer it. What was it like back then when with all this uncertainty in front of you?
I have to be honest, Dean, going back, man, I would do that over and over every time. If we can share like a lot of the stories that occurred, we try to film some things. There's some earlier videos that we did with Alvaro. I think it was near Bryce Canyon in Utah. We did these tours, and they were just so memorable because we're just going into this unknown, right? You sort of see this, how are we going to launch this brand, right? And people told me initially, like, Rafael, like, what are you doing? You're crazy. You're going to go up against Wilson and Head and Spalding and all these guys that were there. Yeah, and it's like, what do you know? It's like you're throwing your money away and you're going to waste your time. And so we sort of like had this strategy. I was like, well, I think there's an in, through this direction. And it was Alvaro. There's another guy that's not here right now, but Javier Moreno and a couple other players that, early on that they weren't as committed as Alvaro, but I mean, like, we literally would drive cross country, and we began in a truck. I mean, it was this Ford F-250, and it was like you go from club to club to club, and you talk about getting training and doing demos. Beltran was out there like Well, I mean, he was working hard. I mean, he would play 15 people, games to 7 to 11 points, and
Rafa had nightmares playing me those days.
no, never. So he would play, and I was like, "Are you ready to go, Alvaro? We can stop at any time." No, there's still like 7 to 10 more people that want to play. So we stay there, like, and it was just this awesome sort of, and then just meeting people and trying to tell them why we were doing it, what's our story, and we came up with some kind of unique things, I think, for those times, and it was it was quite fun, and there was another component there that with the IRT, they had a really good that they were starting to put that portable court out, in a few public places, and that made it, a lot of fun. I remember once, remember Alvaro in Utah, we went into, I think it was a Subway or something, and we just had posters. Like, we would do this crazy, we printed some posters, and then like we sat down and we just, like this make-believe stuff, and we'd have, hey, can you sign, is this you? Is that your car out there? And can you sign my poster? And then before you know it, we had a line of people, and Alvaro signing posters at a Subway in Utah. They don't even know who he was. I mean, they just think like, who is this guy's got to be important?
Alvaro didn't even know who he was.
Right.
I still don't know.
I can tell you now, Alvaro doesn't play 7 or 8 more people. He plays one, and he's gonna go.
Yeah, sometimes I've seen him throw like the first game away, so he can just get to the last 2.
He said it, not me, Alvaro. So Alvaro, okay. So before you go, tell the fans what Gearbox means to you.
To me, like I said, it's my family. It's a brand that it's innovating, that it's looking to improve every year and to grow the sport. It's a brand that it was made by a guy that I call him Mr. Racquetball. He was a player. He has been a coach. Now he makes rackets. So he's all about the sport. So if you want to support a company that truly believes in the sport, it's Gearbox. Send me my check, Rafa. No, but I truly believe.
All right, Alvaro. Listen.
This team.
It actually sounds really sincere, except the check part. So
Rafa,
thanks for stopping in, Alvaro. I really appreciate you saying this. Filling in the fans with the story. So we'll see you soon. Okay, Alvi. Thanks.
Guys.
Thanks.
Okay, so a little surprise. We wanted to bring Alvi on for you.
That was a nice surprise.
Good. So I want to ask you. We talk about the brand. We talk about I want to ask you, because this comes up a lot in our industry, and some people say that all the sponsored players they kind of kill the retail industry of our sports. What are your thoughts on that statement topic?
Yes, I agree. It's sort of this necessary evil, right? It's but I think what happened, it got out of control. I would say probably around 2005 or so. At first, I think the idea was good. It was like, hey, let's play some players, because I think the clubs were not promoting, or they weren't hiring directors, let's say. USAR had ambassadors, but they weren't really employed or and then a lot of the ambassadors, even we struggled with it. They were so brand loyal that they would almost, when we were going there early on to some places, they're like, well, you guys can't be here. You're not with our brand, so therefore we can't let you in. So it was a lot of this, barriers and things. So it almost, and I think a lot of us have experienced that when you go play and you're a recreational player, you have that main court that's the challenge court, I mean, nobody goes on there unless you're the top dogs. And then if you're, it's not very welcoming. It's not like this, you know, super welcoming. So the player program, I think, was designed initially to make all those things more welcoming for people. You would direct the players or ask them to, invite new people to come in, introduce them to the sport, have them do this. In an exchange, you would either give them equipment free or you would give it to them at a discount. And at some point, I think the companies began to realize that, hey, wait a minute, I could make a direct sale, essentially. It's like a wholesale account. And if I have, several thousand players, it was a good way to almost finance, some of your early sales and some of the production. And that, I think, became some of the trend. I don't think anyone's ever openly said it. I just said something that probably, I think we all maybe know about it, but it's just kind of like it's there, right? But we, even at Gearbox, we realized that was a problem because, you just sit down, you do some simple math. You say, okay, on average, let's say, and I know some brands had up to 2,000 players, right? 2,000 players, 3 rackets a player first year. So, you're at 6,000 times, multiply that, maybe not 2,000, average it at 1,000, players a brand, times 5, times 3. We were saying there's 15 to 18,000 rackets going out, high-end rackets going out every year at free or zero cost. So the first year is, 15 to 18,000 rackets. The second year, you've got the first 15, and now you've got, another 15. So that's 30,000 high-end rackets going out, and these rackets are not being returned. So they were being sold by either the players or given away. And so it began to saturate the market. So now the dealers are complaining. It's like, hey, guys, I'm not making money. I'm trying to sell rackets, but you have so many sponsored players, like they're giving their products away. So who do I sell it to? So then, that drove maybe the price up because there weren't as many units being sold. And the price of the player program, now you've got to hire managers and people to run it. So, after a while, you're like, oh boy, is this really profitable? But at that point, it got to it was kind of like, well, okay, we all want to cut players, but you go first. And then it was like,
nobody wanted to go first.
Yeah, okay, you go first, and then you cut them, and then I cut. And then when somebody did cut them, it always like another brand would go up and say, hey, that guy was really good. And, they would go and they take over. So it just got to this point where they never really say, hey guys, that program needs to now stop. We do need, we need ambassadors in the right locations, but not to this degree. And I think that was the demise for a lot of the brands that, lately are no longer around. And obviously, maybe lack of adaptation to some new distribution channels and ways of doing things. But, they began to look at the player program as, I believe, as a distribution channel. And it was not the right way to do it. And I think it does. It keeps players in, but the problem is that as a brand, you want to invest more, but when you're really just kind of turning your wheels and you don't have excess money to invest, then what do you do? And so the investment just becomes these sponsored players, and then there's some entitlement, I guess, from players at that point too, and so it just it became this weird sort of thing, in the sport, and it's been difficult to bring it down.
It has come down a little bit.
No, it has to. It really does, especially now. So after this, situation that we're encountering now, I think there's going to be some drastic changes in terms of, how it moves forward. Yeah,
I think you're 100% correct there. So speaking of drastic changes, the world's sort of reopening as we speak. There's pockets of the world that are getting open now. What will this I hate this word, the social distancing, do to not only our sport, but Gearbox, the brand?
Yeah, for Gearbox, well, let me address the sport first. The sport, to be honest, I I'm still wondering. I don't know, because there's two aspects of it, right? One, and I say this, there's a sport in the United States, and then there's, the whole world. So, we've got racquetball being participated in Mexico, Central, South America, in Europe and Japan, not quite the numbers that the U.S. has. So I think we look at racquetball as the United States being, the hotbed or the leader in terms of numbers, which it is. However, how is this going to change the future? Well, I think the United States, with not knowing, I mean, the gyms right now, they're all closed. I think personally, the gyms are probably going to be one of the last industries that open to the public. I mean, if you really think about it, maybe not necessarily the racquetball course, but if you're at a weight station, you're sweating, you've got all this, and you get off the machine, and what do? You sanitize it, and then the next person comes out. So, but because we are tied into those types of gyms as an industry, how do you get back into the court? So I don't know how that is going to be addressed, and I don't think it's going to be in the next few months. I think that's going to take a long time.
It's an interesting point, because that we used to talk about the gyms cutting racquetball courts because they looked at that space and said, I can fit, 50 machines in there and pack that square footage, when it may work in our favor now. They may say, well, we need a lot of space, and that's a good space, because they're not going to use that kind of space to put 10 machines, or, I think just the way of the gym is, the gyms will be different, period. Maybe we go back to having racquetball facilities. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a great thing. The other point is, how do we say this? Registered. I mean, the last numbers that I received were about 3.8 to 3.9 million, and through a report that that we purchased of participants in the United States. A regular participant, I believe it, plays a few times a month. Yeah, that's what they categorize. But then you look at tournament players and players that we know, from the industry that buy frequently. I mean, the USA participation or maybe the membership is probably less than 10,000 right now. I mean, I don't know, but it's probably around that number. So, that's a very small percentage to the number of people that play on a regular basis. So, and then there's a tournament side, and then there's what we look at, from the business side. I mean, that's where the bigger numbers are. So how do we reach those individuals? What kind of training or promotion, and tools do we give for those individuals that are wanting to improve their game, or maybe they're just happy with just going out and playing, but how do we educate them into maybe, hey guys, there's ways to improve, or maybe come enjoy the pro level sport or the tournament side. I think that's where a lot of the disconnect has been. So now if this gym component is taken away, I mean, that's where the unknown. But like you said, there could be some new opportunities that come about, and to help promote that. The other side that we're thinking, from our end is like, well, if the indoor space is limited, there's certainly a lot of outdoor courts. I know it's not the same game. I played them both, and I honestly, I enjoy the indoor game much more. The outdoor game is fun. It's different. I kind of kid around. It's like, and I think outdoor guys say that a bad shot in indoor, it's a good shot in the outdoor, right? So,
Correct.
It's not. It's just because of the way the game is. You don't depend on the back wall or anything. So you want to hit the ball so where it goes out. So it's a retraining of the game. But that may be where we all end up going for a while, and we play outdoor, and where we do this. So I'm hopeful, that organizations, brands, and all of us that are involved in promoting the sport figure out, ways to promote it and make it fun, for those players that are currently out there and that aren't necessarily tournament players. And I think we desperately or quickly need to find a way to keep those tournament players active as well. Yeah.
100%. Agree. So the early days of the WRT, Gearbox was a huge supporter of that. Can you tell me why?
Yeah, I think Pablo will answer most of that, but yes, absolutely. I think the direction and the reason for the WRT is that we saw that the industry, and back then the IRT was focused on the top 8 players, and something that we looked at, it was because we spent a lot of time outside the United States going to tournaments, in Central America, South America, Mexico, Canada, Japan. We had a player, Hiroshi. We have a player, Hiroshi. I mean, just think of a gentleman flying, get on the plane to Japan, flies 13 hours, to New York, and then plays a match, and literally the next morning flies back home. That is dedication. So we looked at that in some of the way the draws were set up, and that individual had everything going against him, right? I mean, to be successful at winning a couple of matches, he was tired, jet lagged, and he can only get here one day before the match. Usually got off the plane and was right playing, top seeded individual, and then he was sent home. Now in Japan, the economy, I would say better. He probably had some good sponsors to be able to do that. Now you take the same situation and put it down in Bolivia or, in another country where probably raising of the money to send one of their top players who's a phenomenal player, but then he's, on the road for 30 hours and then gets to try and do his best, in that 1 hour, and then usually ended up failing because the top guys are really good, and these guys are also good, but they need time to get out there and develop their game. So most of the time they would go back home, and then what would they say? Oh, see, we told you, you're not good enough. Those guys are so good. And then so it became really difficult for them to raise money the next time around, and so they weren't being sent. So we thought, the initial thought was, well, how do we support a bunch of individuals to come out here and get the experience to not just play one match, but you need to go deeper into the draw to develop your games, get through that nervous stage, get through that first match, the first game, the first match, and then starting to have success. So the initial thought was, it was, sort of this feeder tour, although we didn't want it to be identified as a feeder tour. It was just a tour, to enable players to come in, compete in a more relaxed sort of, not relaxed environment, but just more competitive in terms of making it fair. I mean, if you're one, it's because you're one, and there was no flip draws, and one played 16 if there was, so it was just a very straightforward thing. And not that there, the IRT didn't have, not that it was wrong, it was just not the right setting to promote growth. So it was really, we felt they needed a different way to promote the growth, and then look for funding in a different way, because even the way the money was spread out, it wasn't so top heavy. It was spread out throughout because we wanted those individuals to come back more frequently. And so, the players agreed to it. The first prize check was not as big, and it was, there wasn't that much difference between first and some of the lower tiers, but I think that's what kept that group initially coming in. And yeah, I mean, initially it began with a lot of Mexico and Central and South American players to want, and it was easier for them because we would ask them to fly to San Diego. And if you look at some videos, we packed that bus with 20 players, and we literally many times
can't do that now.
Draw.
You can't do that. Got a distance. You can only get 5 in there.
Now they have to follow us in the car, but we literally used to carry the entire draw in one vehicle, and like show up to a tournament. So
everybody's here.
Yeah. So it's like here's the tournament. But I think that made it, and I think, and I'm glad we did that, because if you look at some of the players today, there were some of the players that began to have success with that developing.
I definitely have those questions for Pablo. He is coming up next.
Yeah.
Excellent stories. You know, your story going from Marine to player to engineer to racquetball guy, as Alvaro called you. It's a great story. So, Rafael, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I absolutely appreciate it. I want you to stick around because we're going to take a short break. I'm going to be back with Pablo Fajre, but you're going to see this wonderful video from Gearbox Sports. And Rafael, I'm sure we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, everybody. It's not about us. It's not about the individuals, but it's all of us as a whole. One thing we did define, or I wanted, is a logo that stood out on its own. It showed motion. When people see it, it stands alone and it's recognizable. So we had that. I mean, you never know where you're going to make it or how far you take a company, but you know, always my thought, we got to aim for that level. We looked at Gearbox as, you know, the individual. Each racquetball player or each athlete is the Gearbox, and we take that energy and we put it into the sport, running, the rackets and everything else. So we're part of that energy. You know, somebody else in the group says, well, hey, we got gear and we play in a box. That makes sense too. So, you know, we had probably like 50 names, but we narrowed it down to 10, I remember. And then we had our buddy who created all of the graphics, and I remember he gave us the sheet. There's no question, like the logo, the Gearbox, everything just fit. And we all just, that's it. And it was actually very cool the way everything happened. And I remember the initial days, and we got a lot of feedback and said, what's Gearbox, guys? Like, you know, are you a race car company and this and that? And I've always been of the mindset that the person creates the name, the name doesn't create the person. It's not about us. It's not about the individuals, but it's all of us as a whole. And I think this entity is created, which is Gearbox, and we're all protecting that. And then under that, I mean, we've got Racquetball. That was a big drive to begin the company, and we all share the same vision. And everybody here within the racquetball community, you know, we talk about having the sport grow, and I still see all of our players and everything. We all have that same common goal, and let's get racquetball on the map. Let's grow and let's get things moving, you know, in the right direction. So I think that encompasses everybody as being part of the Gearbox family.
Welcome back, everyone. My next guest on screen today is the IoT Director of Streaming, Pablo Fajre. Pablo, welcome to Outside the Rally. First of all, how are you?
I'm good. You know, I'm dealing with this situation, but I'm good. You know, with time to planning, to create, to make tests for broadcasts and other things too.
Well, so you're not used to being on this side of the camera, but I feel that you have a very important role here with the IoT. So let's get right into it. You were the first person to stream racquetball, but not the men's tour. Can you tell me how you started?
I started in 2006. At that point, I wasn't racquetball. I started racquetball in 1989, but at that point, my work wasn't related with racquetball, besides being a coach. And my business partner invited me for an expo, technology expo, and one of the guys was talking about IPTV, you know, TV by internet. So this was very close to the World Championship in 2006 in Dominican Republic. So I was talking with the people from IRF, and I told them, hey, what about we try this? At that point, I didn't have any knowledge about broadcast cameras, nothing. So I make a call from Santiago, Chile to Dominican Republic to a production company, and I rented like 2 weeks before the tournament. When I get there, I didn't know how to use it, so I had to hire a guy from the TV production company, and that was my first broadcast.
Wow. Very innovative, just on the fly. So what you said IRF, so before you started streaming the men, what's the differences between streaming like professional racquetball and then like an IRF event from a streaming, just from a streaming standpoint?
The streaming is not different. The technology, when you put something in TV, is the same thing. Actually, at that point, after the ARF World Championship, I streamed for 3 years the Women's Pro Tour. My wife played in that tour, so I was her coach. Every time we traveled to US, we did the broadcast. And the main difference is outside the court, because the players are the same. People playing the professional tour play for their countries also. But the main thing is environment, is how emotional is outside, in the match, get involved everyone. Family, friends, coaches, delegates, everyone is way more, I don't say excited, but it's more emotional. And some players react in a better way, because when they have a team behind them, they play better. Some people, it's different way. When they play for the country, they play better. When they play for themselves, play better. So I think the main difference is how players react, and is how involved is the rest of the team or the country.
We see that today. So how did you get involved in the IRT network in the early days?
I moved to US in 2009. I think a year after, because the international tournaments, I have a good relation with Rocky Carson. So Rocky, we were always in contact, and Rocky told me, hey, there's an opportunity to do something with the IRT, and he introduced me the people from IRT Network. I started working with them for 2 years.
Wow. Well, speaking of Rocky Carson, I want to bring him on. He's here with us. Rocky, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well. You guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you look nice and relaxed.
Good. Yeah.
You got the coronavirus haircut like me. So, Rocky, early days of the IRT network, how did the idea come to bring in Pablo, and what were some of the reasons?
Well, I remember when Pablo was streaming at those World Championships. Obviously, I was playing for the U.S. team, and I had no clue what he was actually saying when he was saying it, because it was something I'd never even thought of or seen, and I don't think a lot of us had seen. And he was.
Rocky, see if you can move your microphone a little bit closer so we can hear you.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? I mean, my mic hasn't been working too well last week and stuff.
Yeah, we can't hear that good.
Likely all the Zoom classes my kids are doing.
Yeah.
But I'll try to stay in the video. But I remember all those times when he was setting up at the World Championship and for the International Racquetball Federation, and those were great times. But I had no clue what he meant by that. And once we started the IRT network, and things kind of started going the way that Pablo could fit in there, there was no other option than to call him. And in all honesty, it's probably the most instrumental piece for us to be watching racquetball live these days.
Yeah, I mean, you would agree, Rocky, that Pablo is one of the most genuine guys in racquetball.
Right.
That's just, that's a fact. So, real fast. So, what was it like in the early days of Pablo? Did he speak better English or no back then?
It's kind of funny, because I'll look at Alvaro, and I'll look at some of the guys, and I'll say, I can't understand him, Abby. He talks so fast. He goes, it's like that in Spanish too. and so I wish my Spanish was better, but let me tell you guys a couple things about Pablo. Just so you know, I played my first World Championship, I believe, in '98 in Bolivia. I believe I played him there. Is that right, Pablo?
1998, yeah, I remember.
And a lot of people don't realize how great of a player he was. I barely lost in the semis to Jano Brensky. I barely beat him, I believe, in the quarters of the 16. And it just shows you how great of a player, not just how great he has been behind the camera, but he understands the game. He understands how to coach the game. He understands how to play the game. And that's one thing you guys probably don't even know about him.
I absolutely agree with you. There's times we're watching the broadcast and he's on some screen and he's like, no, it skipped. And for sure it skipped. So he has the call. So back in those days, Rock, what was Pablo like on the streaming side? Is it similar like he is today?
Yeah, I don't think he's ever changed. You know, he's always been professional. He's always been genuine. He works his butt off. He wants to do a great job, and he's always, you know, the neat thing is he's always so thoughtful. He's always thinking of what he can do better, not just for the game, but for others as well. And you know, he's probably one of the biggest assets we have in the sport. You know, you had Rafa in here. And we got some great guys that are part of the sport these days, and hopefully we can capitalize with them.
Well, you're one of them also, Rocky Carson. Rocky, I want to thank you so much for jumping on and filling us in on early Pablo days. And I'm sure I'm going to see you on one of our next shows coming up soon. So thanks a lot, Rocky.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Pablo, for everything you've done for us and for the sport. And look forward to getting back on the court and seeing you guys face to face.
Thank you for your words.
So, Pablo, tell me one thing that's changed from a streaming standpoint from when you started.
Well, technology is a big change. You know, it's the same thing than TVs. TVs 14, 15 years ago was totally different. And today, standard definition to HD, and now we're in 4K and actually 6K or 8K. I don't know where it's now, but it's improving. And
I just need the remote. I don't care what kind of TV it is. I just want to know how to turn it on.
And in 2006, because the technology was in the early stages, you don't have equipments. You don't have TriCaster or stuff like this. So you have to do it by computers and have to manually make some kind of connections and try to get the signal. It wasn't something like now, you know, you can do it with your phone. You can broadcast with your phone. You can broadcast wireless. You know, you can do a very, very good image with everything. You know, or computers and cameras. Before was a huge cameras. Cameras was big. Right now, sometimes cameras are. You almost can see it's like an inch, quarter inch, an inch by inch of size. So the biggest thing is the quality of the image, and the second is the equipment involved. Better cameras, better broadcast equipment, better streaming encoder equipment, stuff like this.
You'd love all that electrical stuff. I remember going to the store with you one time, and you know, it was I had to pull you out of. Let's just get what we need, and can we get back to the gym? But no, you wanted to stick around.
The main thing is you can get a device from the store or whatever, but the main thing is what you do with the device. You know, it's not the tool; it's how you use it. So sometimes you have to combine things, and this start making the difference in your broadcast.
Absolutely. So let's shift over to the current days. After, you know, you have 1 year with the tour, with the IRT now, back up with the IRT. What do you like about the Pro Tour now?
What I like the Pro Tour is a little bit two things. One is the combination. I know we will talk about the WRT, but the combination between the new players and the traditional players, so the good players, you know. So the good thing right now, the bunch of new players, kids, upcoming players, players from out of the country, I think made the tour more fun, entertaining. I think this is one of the main things. The opportunity to broadcast everywhere, all the guys, and almost every month is something good. I like racquetball. I like to read racquetball. I'm involved in racquetball for 30 years, so I like the sport.
It shows in your work, Pablo, to be honest. Speaking of today's players, some may say that there's a deep pool of talent in the players, meaning 1 to 32. Well, 2 to 30. It can be argued that it's a direct result from the work of the WRT that you put in. So let me ask you, we listened to Rafa before. What was your reasons for starting the WRT?
Well, Rafa make a very good explanation, and the truth is exactly what he said. Because my involved with International Federation for the IRF, I have contact with most of the players. I know everyone. I know from the junior career when they were sometimes. Most of them are sons, and the father played before for the country, and now the kid is playing for the country. So in 30 years, you met a lot of people. One of the reasons was, like Rafa said, they are very focused in the high level, but there is a lot of players they're starting, or they can start their careers in a lower level, but they need some push, some help in order to develop their career, because it's very hard to get the tour, actually flying from out of the country, play one match, and most of the chances is lose that match and come back home or play another division, but it's not the pro. So the main thing was try to create an opportunity for other players in order to be professionals. In the end, it's a very good complement what the IRT was doing and what the WRT did, because today everybody's playing in one tour, and that tour get stronger. It's stronger today. I think that is what I like. That is what I think the result, and I think was a good bet. Good bet what we did.
And you also wanted to stream.
Of course, yeah. I missed that part. So yeah, this was the other thing. I like to stream, so this was a very good solution for me, because I had to deal with rights and tournaments, and it was a good situation, for me.
So you mentioned the young players. Do you think now younger players, they have an opportunity to succeed in the current IRT?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we did opened the door for other players. And the young players usually have the buddies, his partners, his friend. So today you see many of the players in the IRT invite their friends, young ones too. So we have, like you said, 32 good players. Sometimes you see the draw, and sometimes guys, well, Conrado Moscoso maybe is one of the biggest examples. He played one tournament and won the tournament, and then played the other, made the final. So there is not too many players like him, but it's one of the reasons what the motivation to start. But anyway, today we have good players. The IRT opened the door for those guys. They have a lot of help. Actually, the foundation helped the player for the room hotel. Is a good help, and I think the players feel welcome in the IRT in order to keep competing and play. The main thing is we have to keep doing what the WRT did, helping players in order to become professionals. And I think because different level of tournaments have different goals, and I think the Pro Tour Tier 1 Grand Slam still the same, but I think the satellite could be a good way to helping and bringing new players to the tour.
That's something that obviously we're always focused on, increasing our satellite events. But I get what you're saying. So if we have more of those lower satellites with more promotion and maybe even streaming them, that will motivate the players to get better, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you translate well.
Yeah. I know I do speak Pablo. So, so I have to say the likes of Perea, Montoya, Bredenbeck, Horn, and even Alex Landa, guys like Thomas Carter, Sebastian Fernandez, and Eric Cuevas, they've all played on the WRT, and now they're pretty much staples on the IRT. They've come to every event, almost all of them. Name one really good player who most people do not know, and how good can they be if they played on the IRT regularly?
Well, it's a very easy answer. Alex Cardona, for me, is one of the most talented players I've ever seen. And right now, he's not very involved in racquetball, but he was for years very consistent in the WRT. He's one of the most talented players I ever seen.
Yeah, I just watched him at Mexican Nationals, but he didn't fare well against the De La Rosas, Sebastian Fernandez, the young guns that are now taking over Mexican racquetball. Would another one be Polo Gutierrez?
Polo is a very good player, but Alex is almost 30, and Polo is, I don't know, over 35. Polo was very good player. This was another case. Polo was very good player, but he hardly played 1 or 2 a year in the IRT. So I tried to get those players and make them play again, come back to the competition. And yeah, this is one of, I think, a waste of talent, because Polo was very good player, very, very good player.
So what does the sport, racquetball, have to do to continue growing young professional players? I'm not even talking about young players. I'm talking about young professional players.
I think what we were talking before about the satellites creates an instant in order to the players can go to the tournaments, make some money, be helped with some expenses, or sometimes, because most of those guys are kids, so you have to. It's very hard. It's totally different when you deal with a kid, with an adult. So one of the things I did is, because many of the guys were out of the country, I deal with the federation. So I tried to create some, support for them. The federation send them, supported with something, so we did something more customized for everyone in order to help them, in order to play. Because it's Sebastian Fernandez, when he started playing with us, was 14 years old. So it's a lot of responsibility too, in order to create a safe environment. There are a lot of kids. The kids got wild when they're by themselves. So it's I think you have to create some system structure in order to support them, and that support is not just open the entries. It's just you have to deal sometimes family, national federations, the players, and help them in some way to all the logistics in order to be in the tournament.
I have to say that I definitely agree, and we've seen the fruits of that. We've seen that supporting those young players, and now they're all starting to come. So I do hope it continues. Well, Pablo, thank you for being on this side of the camera for this particular episode. I personally, I think you always think of the best interest of the game of racquetball and how it grows. I mean, that's just what I got from working with you over the past year. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you, to be honest. Thank you for what you do for this game, and all the people that don't know, now they do know. And from the IRT management group, we, and I say we, are extremely pleased to have you on our team, Pablo. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean. I had the same feeling. I like to be there too. Thank you.
All right, Pablo. So we will talk soon. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. In my opinion, tonight, both guys, they're true pioneers for this sport. So thank you, Rafael Filippini and Pablo Fajre, and our special guests, our IRT pros, Alvaro Beltran, for stopping in, Rocky Carson for giving us a few minutes, and a huge thanks to our producer, Mark Gibbs, for running the entire show. It does not happen without him, so thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, next week, we will have the one and only Marty Hogan on the show. This will be one that you do not want to miss. I personally am thrilled. The show will be Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have questions for Marty, please message the IRT on Facebook. Maybe we'll use them in the show. I spoke with Marty last week, and he doesn't want the easy questions. So hopefully, we're not giving him any layups. How does it feel to be Marty Hogan? No, he wants the hard ones. What the hard ones are, I don't know. So send them in. Make sure you tune in next week on Outside the Rally. I'm Dean Baer. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.